I'm joined by Matthew Filipowicz, host of the Matthew Filipowicz Show, the Boston-based progressive program. Matthew, great to talk to you. You know, we had scheduled this interview a couple weeks ago before we knew anything about the Boston Marathon bombing, and it just so happens that we have you here. You were also in Brooklyn on 9/11, so I think there's a lot of interesting things we could discuss here. First of all, how did you first hear of the bombing? Where were you? That type of thing, just to get that kind of out of the way.
Sure. Well, I live in the Boston neighborhood of Brighton, which is kind of probably the western outlier of Boston. Boston's actually a pretty small city. People think Boston's actually really big, but geographically, Boston's actually a really small town. And so actually the marathon actually starts way out in the western suburbs, 26 miles out, and then goes all the way and finishes in downtown Boston. It passes about like 4 blocks away from where me and my wife live. And actually that morning we went down and actually watched the front runners go by. It's like 4 blocks away. It's fun. A bunch of people come out and, cheer along along the route. This is actually, we're not that far off from, we're on the other end of Heartbreak Hill, the famous hill that the hardest part of the marathon where people are going up this insane incline. And so we went down, around 11 or so and watched the front runners go past where we were. And then, the front runners passed, and I went back to our apartment, and I'm working on my show for today. And all of a sudden, I actually saw literally like 30 police motorcycles zoom past my front window, sirens blaring, and there was so many of them, and it was so sustained. I actually thought that something must have been wrong, and so oddly enough, right then and there on Twitter, I saw that the fact that there was at least one explosion, and then like everyone else, we started seeing all the different reports coming in, some accurate, some not accurate, of just the horror that happened down on the finish line of the Boston Marathon.
So now we're hearing this morning from Deval Patrick and from the police commissioner, Ed Davis, and others about kind of the slight contraction of the crime scene area from something like 16 blocks to 12, but that really all over Boston there's going to be increased security. Expect to have maybe somebody on the MBTA police asked to look through your bag, all these types of things. So I'm curious, you were in Brooklyn right after 9/11. What do you worry about in terms of this rush to be more secure? Is it just a good thing? We should do absolutely everything we can, or are you concerned about it?
I'm very concerned about it. I actually was living in Brooklyn, again, like you said, on 9/11. I could actually see the Twin Towers from the end of my block. On 9/11, I actually had in the backyard of the apartment I was staying in, I actually still have this. There was a piece of paper, just a random piece of some office building up on the Twin Towers, this singed financial forum that ended up landing in my backyard. But what I mostly remember after 9/11, obviously, and it's similar to what we're feeling here in Boston now, is that fear, that sort of just that nervousness and fear. But mostly, the thing that bothers me the most, and when you talk about the fact that they're going to be, doing more searching of bags here in Boston, I remember after 9/11 in New York, seeing friggin' military soldiers with M16 machine guns on the street corners. I remember seeing F-16 fighter jets literally zooming overhead like you're living in a war zone. I remember, obviously we all remember the stuff that came after that, which was the Patriot Act, the being lied into war. And I very much do worry about that happening here. It's not that people shouldn't be stressed out and shaken by what happened. Of course, we're going to be shaken. This is a very serious thing that happened on 9/11 and what happened now. But we have to be very, very vigilant about the fact that there are a lot of not so good people who are very, very good at exploiting that fear. They'll exploit that fear for power. They'll exploit that fear for money. You have not only the military-industrial complex, you have the security-industrial complex, which exploded after 9/11. I do very much fear that that's going to happen here. I mean, if you look at the fact that they're talking about checking bags, I'm someone who thinks that isn't really going to help anything. I mean, it's not like you can you're going to check every single solitary bag as you're walking down the street. You're going to create checkpoints. Personally, I would say that's, if you want to create a checkpoint, you're just going to create another bottleneck, which would also be another target for a terror attack. I think the reality is these attacks don't happen very often, and not that when they do happen, they're not tragic and horrible, and we need to empathize with all the people who are victims of this. But the odds, we're lucky. Most of people listening live in the United States of America. We are very, very lucky that we live in a country that, for the most part, we are safe from terror attacks.
Yeah, well, earlier I was saying that statistically speaking, these incidents are very rare. And even when you look at the incident, and I don't mean to minimize it in any way, but we have 3 people at this point who have died and closing in on 200 who have been injured. Statistically speaking, you are not going to encounter one of these incidents, knock on wood, based on today's status quo, if you're just going about your business or going to a marathon. But that being said, I think the line between security for the sake of either actual security or even just making people feel safe, which I think also has value, and then crossing that into exploiting the event to do things, which at the top of the list would be using 9/11 to go into Iraq, which had nothing to do with it. The line between those, there's a large gray area, and you don't always know right away when you hear of a policy which of those umbrellas it fits under.
Absolutely. There are obviously things that people can do to be smarter about security, but I'm someone who thinks we crossed that line a long, long time ago. And after 9/11, if you look at the warrantless spying that's going on, if you look, and this isn't just things that happened under Bush. If we look at the Obama, I think all of this stuff can be traced back to just the idea of exploiting fear. If you look at Obama's assassination of American citizens, if you look at the drone war, if you look at all of that stuff, all of that is actually, you can draw a direct line to the fear that we all felt on 9/11, and then people, again, exploiting that fear to their own end. And again, some of it might be, I'm not going to, some of the motives are clearly bad. Some of the motives are just profit. Some of the motives are, some of the motives may be fine. That maybe some people may be thinking they're doing the right thing, but I'm someone who definitely thinks we are way past that line. And what could we have possibly done to stop what happened in Boston?
We've been speaking with Matthew Filipowicz, host of the Matthew Filipowicz Show. What's the best way for our audience to find you?
Well, I don't expect them to know how to spell Filipowicz, so the best way to find me is MatthewF.net.
All right, MatthewF.net. Great to talk to you, Matthew, and we'll definitely talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, David.